Welcome to the Quotive Corner. Today's quote comes from a writer we visited before on this show, and this particular line of his is so compact and so visual that it deserves its own episode entirely. The information you consume each day is the soil from which your future thoughts grow. That's James Clear, published in his 3-2-1 newsletter on December 21st, 2023. Clear is the author of Atomic Habits, one of the best-selling nonfiction books of the last decade, and a writer who has built his reputation on finding the clearest possible expression of ideas about habits, decision-making, and continuous improvement. This line is a perfect example of why that reputation holds. One sentence, one metaphor, and it opens up more than most paragraphs do. Let's consider the metaphor before anything else because it's doing real work. Soil. Not a filter, not a foundation. Soil. The choice of that specific word matters. A filter implies something passive. Things pass through it or they don't, and what comes out the other side is simply a cleaned version of what went in. A foundation is structural. It supports what sits on top of it, but it doesn't produce anything. Soil is different. Soil is alive. It is the medium in which growth happens, where seeds are transformed into something larger, more complex, and more nourishing than what went in. What you plant in healthy soil and what you plant in depleted soil produce fundamentally different results, even from identical seeds. The soil isn't just context, it's a determinant of outcome. Clear is making a specific claim. The information environment you inhabit every day is doing the same thing to your thinking. What you read, watch, listen to, scroll through, and absorb, not occasionally but daily, habitually, as the background texture of your mental life, is the medium in which your future ideas, opinions, and decisions take shape. You are not a passive receiver of information who then independently generates thoughts. Your thoughts grow out of what you've been feeding the soil of your mind. Change the diet, and eventually the harvest changes too. This is a more radical claim than it first appears, because most people experience their opinions and ideas as their own, as things that arose from their own reasoning, their own experience, their own native intelligence. And in a meaningful sense, they are. But the raw material those opinions were built from didn't come from nowhere. It came from whatever information environment has been surrounding the thinking, and if that environment has been narrow, slanted, repetitive, or low quality, the thoughts it produces will bear those marks. Not obviously, not in ways that feel like contamination from the outside, but in the shape of what seems natural to think, what possibilities occur to you, what you're even able to imagine. Think about what the average person's information diet actually looks like on an ordinary day. A social media feed algorithmically curated to show them content that produces strong emotional reactions, outrage, fear, tribal validation, because strong emotional reactions keep people engaged, and engagement is what the platform sells. News headlines optimize for clicks rather than clarity, because clicks generate revenue regardless of whether the story produced understanding. Entertainment designed for passive absorption rather than active engagement. The occasional long-form piece or book, usually chosen because it already confirms something believed. That's the soil most people are growing their thoughts in, and most people have never made a conscious decision about any of it. Remember what Maimonides warned us 9 centuries ago, not to consider something proof just because it is written down, because a liar who deceives with his tongue will not hesitate to do the same with his pen. He was describing the problem of uncritical consumption. Clear is describing the cumulative effect of it. Individual pieces of bad information can be evaluated and discarded, but a sustained diet of low-quality information does something subtler and harder to detect. It shapes the questions you think to ask, the frameworks you instinctively reach for, and the range of answers that seem plausible. You don't notice depleted soil by looking at it. You notice it in what fails to grow. The practical implication is both simple and uncomfortable. If you want to think better, more originally, more clearly, and with more genuine understanding, the work doesn't start with thinking harder. It starts with feeding the soil differently. Reading more carefully and more widely than feels immediately necessary, seeking out information sources that challenge your existing frameworks rather than confirming them. spending less time in environments designed to generate emotional reaction and more time in environments designed to generate genuine understanding. Choosing inputs that are nutritious rather than just stimulating. That's not a natural default. The stimulating inputs are engineered to be more immediately compelling than the nutritious ones. A well-argued, long-form essay about a complex topic competes for your attention against an endless stream of content specifically designed to be irresistible. The deck is stacked, which is exactly why Clear's observation is worth treating as a deliberate discipline rather than something that takes care of itself. In a prior episode, we discussed John Stuart Mill, who gave us the observation that teachers and learners go to sleep at their post as soon as there is no enemy in the field, that unchallenged beliefs lose their vitality and go dormant. Clear is describing the information diet version of the same problem. A mind fed only confirming, comfortable, algorithmically agreeable content is a mind that has lost its enemy in the field. It stops growing in the directions that would actually be useful. It gets very good at the intellectual equivalent of indoor plants, things that survive on minimal light but never quite flourish. There's also a generational dimension worth naming. The information diet of someone who came of age reading books, long-form journalism, and having unmediated experiences is genuinely different from the information diet of someone who came of age inside algorithmically curated feeds and short-form content. That's not a moral judgment about either group. It's an observation about what kind of soil each has been growing in. And it raises a real question about what kinds of thoughts are easy to think and what kinds are becoming harder as the average information environment gets shallower and faster. Now, the honest counterpoint, because this show doesn't skip it. The metaphor has limits. Humans are not plants. We have the capacity to critically evaluate the information we consume in ways that seeds cannot evaluate their soil. Two people absorbing the same depleted information environment can produce very different intellectual outcomes depending on what they bring to it. Their existing frameworks, their native curiosity, their willingness to question what they're receiving. The soil matters, but it isn't entirely determinative, and excellent thinking has emerged from people working in genuinely constrained information environments throughout history. The point isn't that your information diet controls your mind completely, it's that it shapes the conditions in which your thinking happens, and most people have never made a conscious choice about those conditions. The soil is being chosen for you, by algorithms, by platforms, by the path of least resistance, unless you choose it deliberately yourself. And the choosing, like most things that actually matter, requires more intention than it seems like it should. What are you planting in? What are you growing? Thanks for spending a few minutes here at the Quotive Corner. If this one made you look at your daily information habits with a little more scrutiny than usual, that's the whole point. Wisdom isn't in the quote, it's in the reflection. I look forward to seeing you in the next episode.